Good morning to the faithful few here who are with us this morning. I don't know if we've got the remote set up or not. Randy, Randy, I see a hand. Thank you, Randy. So welcome to those that are here and to those that are joining us remotely. We're glad to have you with us, either here or in your own place, and would, of course, be delighted to have you here if you were able. Some of you, I know some of you are not really able to be with us, and so we're glad to have this mechanism by which you can join us. Let's bow for just a word of prayer, and Bill, if you would, please, sir, say it. Amen. Thank you, Bill. And a Happy New Year to all. And it's great to see Johnny here. Great to see Winnie. Of course, he's been here now, back with us for a while on the mend. And so it's just, we're just hoping for a really healthier New Year for all. We, of course, are continuing our study of the minor prophets. And whether you've thought about it or not, there are 12 minor prophets, and we have 13 lessons each quarter, so we have 2 lessons in Zechariah in this book. Otherwise, it's one per week. As Mark mentioned last time, we're giving our friend and brother Ronnie one more week. He was originally scheduled to teach today, and I swapped with him. And Randy, if you've got a hand back there, and I've told Ronnie that I'm sure if you're going to be here next Sunday, that you'd be glad to swap with him again. Are you going to be here next? Yeah. Okay. So Ronnie, he's saying yay, verily. So if you need another week beyond this week, take it. That's get to them. Thank you, my boy. Well, so Zephaniah that we're studying today. The prophet Zephaniah was contemporary with Habakkuk and Jeremiah, and as we'll see in a minute, I want us to talk about the King Josiah, and with the prophetess Huldah. How many of you know about the prophetess Huldah? I guess I'm sure, I've read through the Bible, so I've come across the prophetess, but I didn't remember about her. So significant prophecy from her that we'll be seeing here today. And this, of course, was during the time of King Josiah. Zephaniah 1:1, which is the only verse in the chapter that the author of this little study book saw fit not to include, says, "The word of the Lord which came to Zephaniah, son of Cushi, son of Gedaliah, son of Amariah, son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, king of Ammon, or son of Ammon, king of Judah." So, of course, this prophecy was to Judah, and is widely noted by commentators and so on. There is no other prophet that tells us as much about his ancestry as Zephaniah does, and presumably because he was of royal descent. And he's referred to sometimes as the royal prophet because of that. Presumably, this is King Hezekiah. That's in his lineage, otherwise he would not have mentioned him or stopped with him as he did. And also, another interesting thing about Zephaniah is that given his ancestor Cushi, that's thought almost certainly by all the commentators to make him from Cush, which is a sort of a combination of Ethiopia and Sudan, North Africa. And so he is perhaps, well, this was perhaps a dark-skinned prophet. I mean, that the one in his lineage was likely a dark-skinned man. So that's sort of an interesting little detail. King Josiah reigned from 640 to 609 BC, and Zephaniah prophesied during this time. It really isn't known how much influence the prophecy that Zephaniah made, had on Josiah. But Josiah was a great king. There's almost no peer. He was such a good king. And but certainly, as we'll see about him in just a minute, he certainly went in the right direction with the various influences that he may have had. So, as I mentioned here, the final year of his reign was 609 BC, and the captivity of Judah began in around 605 BC. So right on the heels, so to speak, of Josiah's reign, they began to be taken into Babylonian captivity bit by bit. I mean, there were multiple waves of that. So it was very soon after Josiah's death. Let's look at, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on some of this, but let's look at some of the text here from chapter 1. There's quite a lot of it. I'll read part of it maybe, and then I'll stop. And Doug, if you don't mind, just go ahead and what have we got? Read about half of it or whatever. If you're good, go ahead.
In the same day I will punish all those who leap over the threshold, who will fill their masters' houses with violence and deceit. And there shall be on that day, says the Lord, the sound of a mournful cry from the fish gate, and wailing from the sepulchre, and a loud crashing from the hills. Wail, you inhabitants of Lachish, for the merchant people are cut down, for all those who have no money are cut off. And it shall come to pass at that time that I will search Jerusalem with lamps, and punish the men who are settled in places, who say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, nor will he do evil. Therefore their goods shall be booty, and their houses of desolation. They shall build houses, but not inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards, but not drink their wine. The great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hastens quickly. The noise of the day of the Lord is bitter. There might be men shall cry out. The mighty men shall cry out. The day is the day of wrath, of trouble and distress, a day of devastation and desolation, of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of trumpet and alarm against the fortified cities and against the high towers. I will bring distress upon men, and they shall walk like blind men, because they have sinned against the Lord. Their blood shall be poured out like dust, like their flesh, and their flesh like their victims. Neither the silver nor the gold shall be able to deliver them to the day of the Lord's wrath. But the whole land shall be devoured by the fire of his jealousy, and he will make speedy rivers, and all of them who dwell in the land.
Thank you very much, Doug. That's a lengthy reading. Isn't that an amazing indictment of this people? Just a couple of comments on that. There's various translations in verse 7, but Milcom or Molech. Molech was the so-called national god, idol god of the Ammonites. And in Solomon's older age, you remember it's said of him that in his later years, the many wives and concubines that he had turned his heart away from God. He actually built a high place to Molech on the Mount of Olives. This is the idol god that people sacrifice children to. Isn't it amazing what can happen to somebody in a lifetime, as it did to Solomon? And one other comment about the passage, we'll say much more about it in a general way, but there's verse 14. If you want to look for a key verse, so to speak, in this chapter, it would certainly be 14. The great day of the Lord is near and coming very quickly. That is the situation that these people were faced with. Josiah, now back to him, and he was reigning during this time, and he himself was the great-grandson of Hezekiah, who was a good king, and obviously it'd be good from Zephaniah's standpoint to claim him, and also from Josiah's standpoint for that matter. He was a good king and really one of the best, and he removed the idols and the practice of idolatry and so on from Judah to a very great extent and restored proper worship. The intervening two kings were Manasseh and Ammon, so grandfather and father, respectively, of Josiah. And then, of course, in the two of those were not in Zephaniah's lineage, but they really, especially Manasseh reigned for 55 years. And he was a very evil and wicked king. 55 years is a long time, right, in the lifetime of a country or people. So he did a lot of bad things and had a lot of time to do it. And so he undid really everything that his father had done and maybe made it more so. And he really, in a way, his reign sort of provided a tipping point, so to speak, for God to take this people, Judah, into captivity. He was so disgusted with with Manasseh and his leadership, and so there was really no turning back. God had no intention of changing his mind about that, and so he was going to take them into captivity. If you would like to, you might turn to 2 Kings. 2 Kings 22 and 3, really, I guess, and then 2 Chronicles 34 and 5 along in there to give the account of Josiah, but also just to look just a little bit at Manasseh's wickedness. Look at 2 Kings 21 for just a minute here, verses 10 through 15. And this is what it says here about Manasseh. Now remember that Hezekiah was a good king. This is his son, and this is what he's up to. Now the Lord spoke through his servants the prophets, saying, since Manasseh king of Judah has committed these abominations, having done more evil than all that the Amorites did who were before him, and has also misled Judah into sin with his idols, therefore, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, behold, I am bringing such a disaster on Jerusalem and Judah, that whoever hears about it, both of his ears will ring. I will stretch over Jerusalem the line of Samaria and the plummet of the house of Ahab, and I will wipe Jerusalem clean, just as one wipes a bowl, wiping it and turning it upside down. And I will abandon the remnant of my inheritance and hand them over to their enemies, and they will become as plunder and spoils to all their enemies, because they have done evil in my sight and have been provoking me to anger since the day their fathers came from Egypt, even to this day. So God has absolutely determined that he's going to bring not ultimate destruction on his people, but he's going to take them into captivity and obviously teach them some serious lessons. Well, then after him, Ammon, who was the father of Josiah, had a 2-year reign and was assassinated by his servants. And then along comes an amazing king. I mean, I'm sure you, in your lifetime, I have known wicked sons of righteous parents, and I have known the reverse of that. You know, you never know for sure, do you? I mean, everything being equal, you'd expect good kids from good parents and so on, but there are exceptions. But Josiah was age 8. So you can, when he became king, so you can understand, we understand, he wasn't really calling all the shots. When he's 8 years old, he had to have had some regent and some others that were working with him. But as soon as he became of age, really, he begins to make some very good decisions. If looking at 2 Kings 22 for just a minute here, and just to start out about him, but 2 Kings 22, beginning with verse 1. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 31 years in Jerusalem. Now, so he was 39, right, when his reign ended. In Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jedidah, the daughter of Adiah of Bozkath. He did what, this is so significant, he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, and walked entirely in the way of his father David, and did not turn aside to the right or to the left. That's a great, that right, neither to the right nor the left is a, Mel likes to use that every once in a while. That's a great way to express the dedication really to God. That was this man, Josiah. Down about him in, on down in the chapter, we see that there are repairs going on in the temple that he's undertaken under his reign. And in the process there in the temple, they found the book of the law. It had been entirely lost, totally ignored. Apparently piled behind, who knows, junk somewhere in a room in the temple. And Hilkiah the high priest said to Shaphan the scribe, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord. That's verse 8, 2 Kings 22, verse 8. And Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan, who read it. Then Shaphan the scribe came to the king and brought back word to the king and said, your servants have emptied, and so on. Moreover, verse 10, moreover, Shaphan the scribe informed the king, saying, Hilkiah the priest has given me a book. And Shaphan read it in the presence of the king. When the king heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his clothes. Then the king commanded Hilkiah the priest, who all the group here, go inquire of the Lord for me and for the people. And this is just a great passage here. Go inquire of the Lord for me and for the people. I mean, on my own behalf, on the people whom I reign, and all Judah, concerning the words of this book that has been found. For the wrath of the Lord that burns against us is great, because our fathers did not listen to the words of this book to act in accordance with everything that is written regarding us. I mean, if we just paused right there and really focused on that passage for the rest of our time, I mean, that's for us too, isn't it? You know, it's amazing. This man that had this heart, he would have been, this was the, what does it say? He was like 26, I believe he was 26 years old at this time, and he is so determined to do the right thing and to do it for all the right reasons. It's just amazing what a good leader he was. So he's doing it for all the people and inquiring about the book in order to please God. And now then, who comes to our attention but the prophetess Huldah. And down in verse, so they went and took him to the prophetess Huldah. And she was the wife of Shallum, who was the keeper of the wardrobe, as it says. And she lived in Jerusalem in the second quarter, and they spoke to her. Then she said to them, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Tell the man who sent you to me, that is Josiah, this is what the Lord says. Behold, I am going to bring disaster on this place and on its inhabitants. All the words of the book which the king of Judah has read, since they have abandoned me and have burned incense to other gods, so that they may provoke me to anger with all the work of their hands. My wrath burns against this place, and it shall not be quenched. But to the king of Judah, that's of course Josiah, who sent you to inquire of the Lord, this is what you shall say to him. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Regarding the words which you have heard, since your heart was tender, and you humbled yourself before the Lord when you heard what I spoke against this place and against its inhabitants, that they would become an object of horror and a curse, and you have torn your clothes and wept before me, I have indeed heard you, declares the Lord. Therefore, behold, I am going to gather you to your fathers, and you will be gathered to your grave in peace, and your eyes will not look at all the devastation that I am going to bring on this place. So they brought back word to the king. And, you know, again, as Mel does sometimes, frequently, maybe nearly every Sunday, if you want a reading assignment today, it would be 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 22 and 23, and then the parallel chapters on over in 2 Chronicles. But this is an amazing man, but God has made up his mind now. And you know, whether the prophecy that Zephaniah gave came, it probably didn't come before this, presumably, because of the circumstances here. But it may have come soon after that. But it just reaffirms really everything that we see here in this passage that's told to Josiah, because there's no turning back from it. But as is always true in the most wicked of circumstances, there are some who serve God, and in every circumstance, people have an opportunity to serve God, do they not? You remember Elijah the prophet, he thought he was the only one left, right? He thought he was the only one left on the planet that was serving God, and God told him, of course, told him differently. You're not the only one. I have others that are serving. And so this all is not lost as far as an individual is concerned. I think it's noteworthy, and I'll just mention for our sisters here, that God saw fit to use a woman as a prophetess here, and just sort of did it without apology or explanation, right? We've got a woman that's a prophet. And Deborah, of course, we know, was a prophet and a judge, and so, you know, that's just worth noting. God uses people as he chooses, and we don't have to apologize for him or explain why he does it. We don't know necessarily, right? We know how we're supposed to pick leaders, and that's for the church in our time. That's what we need to know. But she was served a very great purpose back in that time. So feel free to comment or flag me down here as we go if you. Yes, go ahead, Doug.
Clarification for me, please. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but in the scripture that was read earlier, they talked about constructing houses and didn't live in them. They planted vineyards but didn't reap the.
Right. I think what it's saying is that because they were going to be taken off into captivity, they were just right at this time. They were, and by the way, this terrible prophecy that Zephaniah is giving is probably can be looked at in multiple levels. But the most immediate one was that within a very, you know, we don't know exactly during Josiah's reign when he came along, but sometime during those whatever it was, 20-some years. But they were about to go into physically going into captivity to be taken off to Babylon. And so that would be the first one. I mean, it would be like if an invading army comes in and you're in the middle of building a house, or you got a crop in the field or whatever, it's going to be just left the way it was, and you're going to be, you know, with somebody herding you along and taking you away. And by the way, while we're talking about, and Doug's asked about that, also, of course, there are probably additional, at least a major interpretation of this is the ultimate judgment that all of us will face, you know, eventually. And the ultimate removal, finally, of the earth, for that matter. I mean, the burning up of the earth and all the people. And God's eventually going to do that as well. And you know, when it speaks in a sense, and again, this is speaking directly to the people in Judah, firstly, but in a great sense to us too. I mean, for the little span of anybody's lifetime, judgment is near in a sense for everybody, right? In anybody. I mean, you know, if you're 20 years old, it could be said, well, judgment's near for you, right? I mean, what's another 80 years, 70 years, 60, 50, whatever lifetime span we have, it's a twinkling of an eye in a sense, but, you know, we got to get busy serving God because the time is close for all of us in time, regardless. It may be 1,000 years, but for me, it's not going to be 1,000 years, right? So, does that make sense, Doug? So again, it may very well be that Zephaniah also counseled him, but the main thing to get about Josiah is to, so to speak, he hit the ground running. I mean, as soon as this man found out what he's supposed to be doing, he lost no time doing it. And he had got everybody, they cleansed the land, and I mean, it's just to read the details and see what these people had gotten into. I mean, it's said of them literally that they were more wicked than the people they replaced in Canaan. And you know, God, Of course, to use our terminology, God worried that this was going to happen to these people when they interacted with them, intermarried with them and everything. But, they liked all this stuff that these people were doing, and they started doing it themselves and sort of took it up a notch, so to speak, beyond what had been done, going on with the Canaanites before they came there. One thing that he did was restored the Passover, and the Passover. It turned out it said of them that the Passover had not been conducted by these people since the time of the judges. Now, isn't that amazing? Since the time of the judges, the Passover hadn't been, and you can find out a lot more about that in the Second Chronicles parallel. There's just a lot that went on to try to restore it. But the problem is, after all, that in spite of this man's 31-year reign, right away the people went right back to it in the little time that they had, and of course God took them off into captivity as he had predicted that he is going to do. But what an amazing example, this man, and I'm spending more time today on Josiah. Really, we don't know that much about Zephaniah, for one thing, other than what he wrote, which is amazing, by the way. I mean, this is an amazing document that he wrote. But Josiah is just such a sterling example here and contemporary, and he demonstrates to us, to me anyway, how a person can be a good and influential person. Of course, he's king, but he got more influence than most of us will ever have. But in a wicked time, you can have a good leader and do the right thing. And for a while, he turned people back to God. But of course, the tendency to sin, is still going to be there. Back to some emphasis now on Zephaniah. No doubt, this passage that Doug read for us, the chapter 1 of Zephaniah, is figurative. So much of it is figurative. At least at the time that Judah was taken into captivity, humankind wasn't taken away from the earth and so on. But it certainly is highly figurative. Mankind continues until the judgment. And in the first instance, as I mentioned, with chatting with Doug, no doubt it refers to Judah and the captivity by Babylon, and in the greatest ultimate sense, it refers to the judgment that we will all face. And in a general figurative sense, it applies to the fact that God brings judgment in every age. We don't know what God's doing exactly in our time, do we? I mean, we don't. He says it's said of God that He brings down kings and raises up kings. We don't know what God's doing behind the curtain, so to speak. I certainly believe that God is active in our time, that the Holy Spirit is active in our time. But we don't see, and through providence in our lives and so on, but we don't see or know the details as they did, of course, in the earlier generations. But there are these terrible things going on in this land. Baal, the worship of Baal, pagan priests, rooftop worship, which of course was worshiping the sun, the moon, and so on. Wicked officials, the king, and it mentioned interestingly here that the officials and the king's sons would be punished. It did not mention the king, right? They had a righteous king, so he's not going to be punished. Mentioned foreign clothing. God was so unhappy with them, of course, the foreign influences. This skipping over the threshold, and that's variously translated, but that may have to do with the god Dagon. You remember from studying that, where the idol fell on the door sill and broke his arms or whatever. Anyway, that's the idea. Then ever after, they wouldn't step on the door sill because of what had happened there. Violence and deceit. And in the third chapter there are 3 chapters in Zephaniah. In the 3rd chapter, it talks about oppressive Jerusalem, as the New American Standard captions it. In the first verses, there's so much bad going on in Jerusalem. In chapter 2, really, the way the little book works, we got chapter 1 we read today, and we're focusing on. Chapter 2 tells us that about tell the people that their neighbors, their wicked neighbors who had mistreated them, were going to be judged as well, and God was going to bring trouble on them also. It's sort of interesting to me to look at what Zephaniah said by category about the different people that were going to be punished, and we certainly can apply this to ourselves in our time. And it's sort of scattered in a way throughout this. First of all, God knows us, doesn't He? He knows His people. It speaks here of Him going as though He's going through the city, through the country with a light, looking at people to determine who's righteous and who's not. Well, God knows all that, and we don't have to worry about that. Him knowing for sure that we're good people or that we're bad people, we may need to worry about that latter part of it. But here are some different things that he mentioned. In verses 18 to 20, I guess, those who had not sought after God or inquired of Him. That's one category of people. And it's interesting to me to think about these in different degrees. Romans 1 and 2, it's some interesting passages there. That in Romans 1, I guess 20 or 19 and 20, verses 19 and 20, make it clear that God has, it's obvious, we see this around the world, even in primitive peoples, that there is in the human person something from God to seek God, right? He's put that into us to seek Him. And that's really what it's alluding to here, perhaps, that some people just go through their life, maybe live a long, prosperous life, and just sort of ignore the fact that there's a higher power. They just never pay attention to it, never inquire into it. Does the Bible, most of us can't flip a channel on TV without hearing somebody speaking and preaching. So everybody knows there's something that's going on about a higher being, and if you choose never in your life to inquire, well, we're going to be condemned for never looking to see. Another category that he mentions, and this would be in verse 6, is those who turned back from following Him. And that's, basically everybody that he's condemning. But that would be people who had served Him, who had served God, but now have turned back. He speaks of those, this is verse 12, I guess, those who have settled down comfortably and say to themselves that God will not do either good or evil. That reminded me of the passage in 2 Peter 3:4, people saying, well, everything's going on just as it was from the beginning. We can just ignore it all, because if God was going to come back and do anything, He'd have already done it. So that's similar to this thought. That this whole category, which was, of course, nauseating to God, that they feigned, so to speak, loyalty to Him while worshiping idols, while doing other things. God would be happier, it'd be better not to even have anything to say about Him. He brought judgment on false religious leaders and evil civil leaders. And in a general sense, of course, everybody who is a leader in a religious sense better take note about this. This is serious business to be seeking to lead God's people, and His people from a governmental, civil standpoint too, for that matter, because they're set up in a sense from God. So that's somebody that's better toe the mark. People who are trusting their riches rather than God, and thinking, And this is a truism, generation after generation, isn't it? That somehow or other we get too comfortable. People get too comfortable. That way they spend the whole lifetime, trying to build up your wealth or whatever, thinking that this is going to take care of you. Well, there's a bigger problem looming ahead if that's all that you're depending on, all you have going for you. And then, of course, there's those finally that just outright worshiped idols and served them and made no apologies for it, right? And that's so frequently what goes on in this world. I mean, we just see just full out in our time, full out serving of the devil, if you want to put it that way, and no reins put on people in their minds, in their hearts, because that God is out there, and they're going to account for him. So there's a lot here for those people, and there's a lot here for us, certainly in my opinion. Well, he did a call to repentance here, and Josiah was a marvelous example of repentance and service to God, and others could do the same. And he's saying to people reading his prophecy or hearing his prophecy, listen up, judgment's coming, but you've got a chance to do something about it before, in chapter 2, the first 3 verses there of Zephaniah chapter 2, first 3 verses. He says, seek the Lord before judgment. And that can be a watchword for us. Important. Seek the Lord. I mean, those of you that haven't paid any attention, those of you that know something about God but are serving him incorrectly, or they've lapsed in service, any and all of these things, those of you that have left God, those of you that are depending on something other than God, seek God, seek the Lord, listen up. And we need to be listening. I need to be listening. And he's saying in verses 6 and 7 of chapter 2 that a remnant will be spared and protected. God, I think sometimes we think that because we're part, people get in the thing because you're in a family that's religious, or because you're in a church that's quote unquote sound or whatever, that's going to take care of you. Well, it can help, but it's not going to take care of you fully, for that matter. When I, in my teaching years, teaching software engineering and so on, I would have some people work in groups, and I know that some computer science teachers basically assigned the same grade to every member of the group, and I never did consider that to be fair. I mean, I made sure I knew, and I would talk to the individuals in the group. I'd have 3 or 4 people, but I found out if you, in a working team in a class, if you pass about 3 people, somebody's going to try to take a free ride. That's just the way it is. So, I tried my very best to be fair to everybody, but even with my best, I couldn't necessarily be 100% fair. But God Almighty knows, and He can certainly be fair. And there's a beautiful passage here in chapter 3. It's verses 12 through 20. That's something else. That's a lot of reading for today, on top of what Mel will probably assign after a while. But it's a beautiful passage about what God's going to do, and it's no doubt talking about the time of Christ, that when Christ is coming, and the great day of the Lord. The Jew. One thing about it is, and I want to make sure to make this point: the Jews were cured from idolatry. They were taken 70 years into captivity. They came back, and never again did they engage as a nation in idolatry. That cured them of that. I mean, there are lots of other issues, but that was the end of that. And so the great day of the Lord is near, as it says, and in a very true sense, that's true for all of us. And so we need to be seeking the Lord while we have opportunity. I appreciate it. Bill. Right, right.
But anyway, she said, and this is, like this lesson says, it's hard to convince people what God has promised He will do to us. We,
Right,
obey
right.
His law. And she would speak up and say, said, my mother, she was she taught Bible classes, and I know she was in heaven. Just because she taught Bible classes,
Right.
It's just so
Right.
different.
Right. Right.
And when you get down to baptism, that's when you shut it off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's sad,
Yeah. Well, we